Our scripture this morning comes from Mark's Gospel in chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion, and they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. When you look at it for the first time, it's probably not quite what you would expect. It's not nearly as big as you have imagined in your mind. You can see all the way from one side to the other, and almost all of the way from tip to tip. It's really just a big lake. The word sea is a little misleading. And it's really not even a very big lake, especially compared to what we are used to. On one side of it is the modern-day city of Tiberias, with its buildings and houses dotted on the seaside. And on the northernmost end is Capernaum with its ancient ruins, which is where our story takes place. There's a noticeable lack of trees in the area, especially tall ones like we in the South are used to. But what populates the area, maybe more than anything else, is agriculture. Fields and fields of bananas, all different kinds of citrus and avocados line the landscape. Almost all year round, you can at least count on the green of the fruit trees popping against the rocky, arid hills. It is within this landscape that Jesus and the disciples have been sitting on a boat since the morning. This wooden boat, along with several others, has been anchored as close to the shore as they could get for the duration of the day. Crowds have been gathering on the rocky shore, listening to this man speaking in parables about sowers and mustard seeds and lamps under a bushel. The day is now nearing its end, and Jesus, no doubt tired from all of the talking, is ready to leave the crowds behind and go to the other side of the lake. It wouldn't take them long to get there, maybe an hour or so. So they set out along with several of the other boats. Interestingly, going to the other side of the sea indicates more than just a change of venue. The other side would have been Gentile territory, or the country of the Gerasenes, as Mark calls it in chapter 5. And it's actually after this crossing into Gentile territory where they will be immediately met by a man possessed by a legion of demons rushing at them from the tombs. So it is into this unpredictable and foreign land that they sail this evening. Sometime after they've left the lake shore behind them, the sky begins to darken and the wind starts to pick up. Storm clouds roll in over the hills, bringing with them pouring rain. Sounds like watching a storm roll in from the beach. The rain begins pelting the boat, soaking the disciples as thunder booms and lightning cracks all around them. Slowly but surely, the surface of the sea begins to break with whitecaps that beat against the sides of the boat, rocking it from side to side and filling it with water. If you have ever been out on any kind of boat, when a storm has suddenly rolled in, You know exactly how the disciples would be feeling. It is scary to be on open water in the middle of a storm with nowhere to go. There's nowhere to pull over to. There's no shelter to hide under. You are just stranded in the middle of this body of water, trying not to think too much about how you are the highest point around. So it seems reasonable that when the disciples find themselves in this situation, they start to panic. I mean, let's not forget that 4 of them on this boat were seasoned fishermen. So they knew the dangers that the sea brought, and they knew the types of storms that could come on the Sea of Galilee. So if they are this panicky, then that tells you this is not just any ordinary storm. But while they're concerned about what's happening to them, Jesus is just snoozing away on a cushion, tucked into the stern and the back of the boat, completely oblivious to what is going on around them. Sounds a little bit like Jonah, doesn't it? Sleeping during a storm while everyone else is worried and frantic. And then just like the crew come to wake Jonah and beg him to pray to their God, the disciples come and wake Jesus up. In Matthew's version of this story, they cry to him, "Save us." And in Luke, they tell him of their impending doom. But here in Mark's version, there's an accusation. Do you not care that we are perishing? The disciples detect a lack of concern for their well-being. Here's this man who has been casting out demons and performing miracles, and when they seem to be facing their most life-threatening encounter, he is sound asleep. The disciples' cry is one of fear, of doubt, and abandonment. And the disciples are not the only one who have uttered such a cry before. Natural disasters like hurricanes, floods, tsunamis, tragedies that are caused by terrorist attacks, war, or inexplicable acts of violence, pain of various kinds, of personal suffering, sometimes leave us crying out to God, "Do you not care that we are perishing?" When they wake Jesus from his sleep, he gets up, he rebukes the wind, and says to the sea, "Peace, be still." 3 simple words, and the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. Like a lake, first thing in the morning, before any people or boats have ruffled the waters. The great storm is turned into a great calm, and it is peaceful. I can picture so clearly in my mind this scene unfolding. Here are the disciples scurrying around, soaking wet, yelling at one another, trying to steady this boat, terrified that they will either sink or be flung overboard. And then Jesus gets up. He looks at the wind and the sea and speaks to them, and suddenly those white caps disappear. The wind becomes still, and the storm clouds roll back to where they came from. The boat stops its rocking, and everyone is standing there, slack-jawed, eyes wide, looking around, wondering what in the world just happened. The disciples had seen Jesus as a healer and an exorcist, but now they have witnessed something they had never seen before. Someone who has the power to control natural forces. I imagined their stunned faces when Jesus then turns to them and asks 2 questions. Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? But instead of answering him, they look around at one another in perplexion and awe, wondering who this man is. My favorite line in this story, as it probably is for a lot of people, is peace, be still. Even though Jesus is speaking to the wind and the seas, I feel sometimes like he is talking to me, telling me to be still and have peace. And even just reading it helps calm me down. Another reason I love that line so much is that this is Jesus' response to the disciples. He very easily could have reacted to their panic, getting caught up in the chaos himself, but he remains this steady and calm presence throughout the entire narrative. A few weeks ago, we had our annual conference down at Jekyll Island, and our bishop gave his yearly Episcopal address where he gives an update on the state of the conference. Towards the end of his address, he put up two images on a screen. One was of a thermometer, and the other was of a thermostat. He explained that thermometers read the temperature around them and are completely driven by their environments. If it's hot, the mercury goes up. If it's cold, the mercury goes down. With a thermometer, it is a constant back and forth, up and down, always reacting to whatever is going on around it. A thermostat, though, operates very differently. It sets the temperature of the room. It determines what the environment is going to be. It doesn't react to what may already be going on, doesn't get hot when everything else is hot. It is steady and consistent. I'm sure each of us can think of people we know who live life like a thermometer, constantly reacting to whatever is going on around them, always up and down, adding fuel to the fire, flustered and ruffled at the temperature of their present environment. Maybe we sometimes are even these people. And I'm sure we can also then think of people we know that live life like a thermostat. They don't have a parallel response to their environment. They're not consumed by what is going on around them. They're those resilient and steady souls that bring a spirit of peace with them wherever they go. And it can be refreshing and even relaxing to be around them. What Jesus does in this encounter with the disciples in the storm is not only reveal yet again who he is and what it means to be the Son of God, but he models for us how to act during the frantic chaos of a storm. He could have acted like a thermometer, reacting to the environment around him, but instead he acts like a thermostat. He sets the environment. I don't know about you, but there are a lot of times these days where I feel like we are living in a storm. Politically, clearly, the left and the right are pitted against one another, throwing punches and everyone trying to get a word in. Every time you turn on the news or read the paper, there is another big news cycle that is unfolding. Even just this past week, with all of the attention on the separation of families at the border and all of the different voices weighing in on the issue, it feels like we are in a storm. And storms pop up in families and at school. They roll in at work and even here in the church. Differences of opinions clash. Family tensions build and relationships get strained. Controversial issue divides households and even nations. Storms come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them roll in abruptly, and others just slowly build over time. And they all have the ability to shake us and throw off our center of gravity. And so many times, our temptation is to be reactionary to these storms. When we feel threatened or scared or unsure of what is going to happen, we let the environment around us control how we respond. We easily become swayed by the actions or words of those around us. And it is so easy then to get caught up in the momentum of a debate or a tense encounter, or to let even just one comment throw us into a complete tizzy. And then, just like the disciples, we become panicky and fraught with fear. But what if, instead of letting our environments control us, we controlled them? What if instead of letting the world around us determine how we handle the storms of life, we learn to calm the storms of life? We learn to be the steady presence of peace and stillness. Think of how different things could be if we embraced Jesus' presence of peace. Think of how much more listening than talking would get done. Think of how much less the media would have to latch onto. Think of how much kinder we might be to one another. As soon as we walk out of those doors today, we have a choice. We get to choose whether we're going to be a thermometer or a thermostat. We get to choose whether we're going to be yanked around by the temperature of the people around us, or if we are going to set the temperature. A faithful discipleship is characterized by embodying the same qualities that Jesus exhibits, then I think we know which we're probably supposed to be, which is sometimes a lot easier said than done. But time after time in the scriptures, just like in our one for today, Jesus sets the tone. He doesn't add fuel to the fire or get swept up in whatever is going on. He is the steady and resilient and calm presence that makes others feel safe and secure and instills faith. And while we don't have the same kind of power that Jesus has, we do have a power to bring a word or action of tranquility to the storms that we encounter. We have the opportunity every day to be bearers of peace and calm in a world that desperately needs these things. So as we leave today, maybe walking right out into the middle of a storm, remember these words: peace, be still, and be like a thermostat, not a thermometer.